Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here, and I humbly thank you for joining me. Today, I'd like to talk about history history as we know it, as we lived it, and remember it, and history as it's changing right in front of us. When I look at the word history, what I see are two words: his story. His story. Whose story? His story. Not my story, not our story, but his story. And who was writing his story? According to the old saying, history is written by the victors. So if history is written by the victors, then I have to ask, are we at war without knowing it? Because last I checked, a victor is one who defeats an adversary. And whoever this victor is that's writing the history these days, whoever is writing his story, has taken great liberties to change, erase, and rewrite that story, as I perceive it, which in turn has altered our past, our present, and yes, even our future. For all we know, that victor could be AI, artificial intelligence, making history up and changing it daily as it gathers new data by the droves. Could be that. Just as easily as it could be a secretive cabal group that runs the world and hates humanity enough to deem it an enemy worth subduing by diluting its true history with lies. Now, if any of this sounds far fetched, there is a lot for us to learn about who decides what the human collective's real history is. Many of you may wonder why history and the narrative around it even matters. For me, history was always an area of great interest in school and beyond, and I took great pride in my ability to recite memorized historical facts as if I'd been there. I loved learning about where we came from and the stories behind it. I also as I grew into an adult, I began to notice that saying, history repeats itself, was more factual than the actual history itself. Now, history as defined is meant to be a record of past events. Does it matter if our historical records of the past are embellished, falsified, deleted, or entirely made up? From a vibrational frequency perspective, it matters a lot. It matters because the events experienced by our ancestors in the past are 100% entangled with our genetic inheritance, especially our genetic memories. Our predecessors lived it, right? Their memories create the genetic imprints that become our generational inheritance. We inherit their history as well as our genetics. From a vibrational frequency perspective, falsehoods in our historical records, records that we believe are truthful facts, can create distortions in our genetic fields because it creates an energetic conflict within, subtle and unseen, but a distortion nonetheless. A distortion between the true genetic imprint of the ancestor who actually had the experience and the manipulated record of it. A distortion that is caused by the official narrative not matching the reality of the experiencer. How this distortion is reflected in our everyday lives is often through our belief systems and our understanding of who we are. Looking briefly at the AI, artificial intelligence component of historical record keeping, we're led to believe it's the be all end all when it comes to knowledge and information, including historical records. It makes me wonder if AI is part of what's changing our collective history through a phenomenon called the Mandela effect. If you don't know what the Mandela effect is, I highly encourage you to research it and decide for yourself how it might apply to your experiences. Anyway, I wanted to know how AI would describe the Mandela effect, and this was its response. And this is per Chat GPT. The Mandela effect refers to a phenomenon where a large group of people remembers an event or detail incorrectly, often with vivid but false memories. It's named after Nelson Mandela, who many mistakenly believe died in prison during the 1980s, despite him actually passing away in 2013. Okay, so AI is saying here that those who remember history being different than what the official narrative is are remembering it incorrectly with false memories. Really? Really? I beg to differ because I know with certainty that my memories are not false or incorrect. They're my memories. I remember when a box of Fruit Loops was spelled Fruit and not Froot like it is now. I remember buying Haas avocados at the store for years before the spelling changed from HAAS to HASS, as if Haas never existed. I remember when the Fruit of the Loom logo was fruit in a cornucopia and not just a grouping of grapes around an apple. I remember when the Monopoly man had a monocle for decades until the day he didn't, and we're being told he never had a monocle. And this is something that I noticed a couple years ago. I remember when the movie The Color Purple was released in 1983, not in 1985 as listed on the film stats. I know this for a fact because I remember taking my newborn daughter to the air-conditioned movie theater to see the film in order to escape the heat of the summer. That was in 1983. The list of noted Mandela effects is extensive, and maybe you've experienced a few of your own where you've questioned something you once remembered as being one way, and now it's like the way you remembered it never existed. Now, as a side note, the Mandela effect is also intermixed with the study of collective timeline shifts and convergences as well. But that's a subject for another day, and there are groups who study this phenomenon extensively if you choose to dive deeper into that subject. So if you feel that the official version of his story can't be trusted, who can you trust to tell the story of what is happening around you today? Because things are moving fast. In a word, I would say it's us. Those of us who lived it, whatever it is. I especially consider those of us who are part of the Silver Years demographic some of our most valid historians anymore because, yes, we lived it. We lived the great changes of the last century and remember it for what it was at the time. We are the boots on the ground historian these days, and our story, as we lived it, is systematically being altered and erased right under our noses to fit an official narrative called his story. And it isn't my story. You know, maybe the word historian needs to be changed to something else, like my storian, my storian. And this is how I'm seeing it work. Whatever officialdom declares our collective his story to be right now is projected directly into our future generations with an energetic imprint that is incongruent with the genetic imprint of those of us who lived it. Our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, and so on will be educated to believe the his story of events. And that may be in direct contrast to the genetic inheritance we are creating through our memories, experiences, and genetic imprints. The long term effect from this distortion and disconnect within the newer generations to their predecessors because we don't know the truth about those who came before us, about where we came from. The wisdom and knowledge from those ancestors becomes muddled and lost. I see it not only as a cause for history repeating itself, since the accumulated genetic wisdom is lost to a false overlay, but this creates an underlying confusion within our identities and sense of self. And ultimately, this confusion within our identities makes us vulnerable to manipulation. It makes our foundations weaker, not stronger. The truth is, we are a product of the ancestors who came before us, our powerful predecessors. And we are the powerful ancestors of future generations. Their freedoms ride on our backs, just like our advancements rode on the backs of those who came before us. It makes me think of the native and indigenous communities of yore who maintain the continuity of their wisdom and stories throughout their generations by what we would call oral traditions, as opposed to it being digitally documented like it is today, where it can be easily edited. The community's history was maintained and taught by initiated and highly trained storytellers whose role it was to keep the wisdom and experiences of their ancestors alive for the future benefit of all going forward. It seems today, though, what we've got is more like tin can telephone, if anyone remembers that game. You know, two tin cans linked together with a long string and a person on each end, or messages are spoken into the can on one end and received by the person holding the can on the other, um, and so on. You know, it's a fun game that made many of us laugh growing up. But reality is that by the time you get to the end of the line, the messages are usually so garbled that they've lost all connection to the original message, just like our generations and his story. So it seems to me anymore that we need to become responsible for documenting our own history, as opposed to allowing the victors to tell us what they want us to believe it to be. Just saying. Speaking for myself, I feel there is no one better suited to tell my story, my experiences, my takeaways than me. Who I am is my story, not his story, and only I can tell it as I experienced it through my filters and perceptions and all of it. And I'd like to encourage you to think about your story in the same way. Trust what you know, trust your experiences. So I've decided to start sharing some of my story experiences in a new way. Anyone who's read my book, In the Rear View Mirror, now there's a link below for anyone who is curious. Anyone who's read the book, In the Rearview Mirror, would call this my crazy Ivan. And yes, it is a movie reference from the 1980s, The Hunt for Red October, when you take a radical change. It's just basically something a little different. I'm going to start sharing some of my life experiences that were just mine, experiences that those close to me weren't part of and they never really knew about because, it didn't involve them or affect them. So you just never talk about it. You don't share it. And in the end, for me, the lessons and wisdom I derived from these experiences make up who I am today. So look for that coming up. Now, in parting, I'd like to leave you with a question because I love questions. Is there some part of your story that does not match the official his story narrative? Please feel free, leave your comments below. I would love to hear your stories. So until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.